I'm Ernie Humphrey, Educational Programs Leader for Performative, the largest online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Transforming Finance to Drive Strategic Value. Today, Mary Driscoll, Senior Research Fellow from the American Productivity and Quality Center, the APQC, will share with us key results from a comprehensive research study conducted by APQC's Business Excellence and Finance Research Team, and enlighten us as to how 170 leading finance practitioners are streamlining and standardizing finance process to deliver strategic advantage. We'll also experience an interactive conversation between Mary and finance leader Phil Lee from the New Teacher Center, a leader in teacher education, during which we will discover how New Teacher Center is leveraging web-based solutions to transform finance. I'd like to thank NetSuite, whose commitment to thought leadership helps us make this webinar possible and delivered at no cost. A quick note on today's agenda. First, we'll experience a joint presentation and interactive discussion among our featured speakers. Then we'll move to our interactive Q&A session where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you. If you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in. We'll do our best and we'll follow up afterwards, any we do not get to today. A few logistical notes about the webinar. A link to today's presentation and video recording will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. Those who would like CPE credits will need to answer all polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. For any questions on CPE credit, please send an email to cpe@performative.com. Those attendees who qualify for CPE credit will receive a certificate via email within 24 to 48 hours of the event. Again, we encourage you to ask questions on today's topics via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time during the webinar. You will be asked to take a short survey today immediately following the webinar regarding the webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding our event today, as we always strive to improve the ROI we offer our event attendees for their valuable time. A quick word about Performative. Performative is the largest online community resource for senior-level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related leaders. Performative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges that they face every day. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Mary Driscoll, Senior Research Fellow, APQC. Mary is an author, editor, and lecturer with experience in corporate finance, capital markets, and business management. She serves as Senior Research Fellow, APQC, a benchmarking and best practices research organization. Mary leads the Finance Management Research Initiative. Previously, Mary spent a decade as president of CFO Research, the research services arm of CFO Magazine. She has also held editorial roles at Thompson Financial Services and Fidelity Investments. She has written several business books, including Professional Reference Guide, Cash Management, Corporate Strategies. She has won journalism awards for corporate finance, treasury operations, and personal financial planning topics. She currently serves on the advisory board of 3 technology startups. She served a BA in English with honors from the University of Massachusetts and studied accounting and management at Harvard University's CIS program. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to hand the floor over to Mary Driscoll. Mary, the floor is now yours. Please take it away. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for that, Ernie. It's a very, very kind introduction. Before we have a lot to cover here, and so I want to say thank you to everybody for taking time with us today. We'll do our best to manage our time wisely, but I did want to take just a moment to explain what APQC is. APQC stands for the American Productivity and Quality Center. Some people who don't know what that means think we're a software company. Well, as Ernie said, no, we are a non-profit-based research and benchmarking organization based in Houston. I'm up in Boston. Many people will recognize APQC as the company that helped to co-create the Malcolm Baldrige Awards. So we are all about understanding what drives process quality, process efficiency, as well as the best practices. My research stretches from very strategic issues such as enterprise risk management down into the very kind of operational aspects of financial operations, whether it's end-to-end process management or automation. But I just want to give you a quick background on what our mission was and why I enjoy my work so very much. Let me quickly start off by just pointing out that the cost of finance at the typical large company has plummeted. APQC operates what we call an open standards benchmarking database, and in a nutshell, the top quartile performers, that means those companies that do better, more efficiently than 75% of other benchmarks, other companies taking the benchmarking survey. They spend less than 62% of total revenue. Okay, wasn't that long ago that the top performers were happy to get to 1.2%. But it just goes to show, I think, that CFOs, particularly in the wake of the economic downturn and the very slow recovery, CFOs are once again bitten by the productivity bug. And they can afford to. S&P 500 balance sheets have been incredibly strong, and not to mention earnings performance, which has just been eye-popping despite kind of flat revenue growth at many companies. So we did a survey in the second half of last year, and just quickly we heard from 170 respondents. Almost half were very large companies, but there were a good number of mid-size and on the small side of the mid-size range, I'd say. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Middle East. 83% of the respondents focused on, so they had finance titles. 17% had titles such as process architect, that sort of thing. So what did we find? More than anything else, the survey aimed to pinpoint what the CFO's top priorities are. And as you can see in this slide, the one that jumped out the most, and this was a question that said, click all, tick all that apply. So the quality or usefulness of information really jumped out. Now, why is that surprising? To me, anyway, I've been doing this kind of thing for a long time, and you always saw, the desire to boost labor productivity, another way of saying cut costs, as the #1 goal of any finance transformation project. However, what we're now seeing, and I see this in qualitative interviews as well, how can finance be part of, jump on the train we're all calling affectionately big data or business analytics. It's very important that finance be part of that or will be marginalized. Okay, what we see here is one of our survey questions asks, did you think that it was well managed? Well, the welcome news is that, the majority said yes. Given that it wasn't that long ago, when you talk to people about how their efforts to put in new systems or whatever, all we heard were complaints about how this or that program was running aground, over budget, late. My theory here is that the shift is most likely due to what I call the steady march of so-called business excellence methodologies and tools. As Ernie mentioned at the top of this webinar, I teamed up with my counterpart, the research director for our area that focuses just on business process management. Now, these are people, again, who have titles. You might hear process architect, process owner. These are project managers on steroids, so no disrespect. These people are absolutely vital to the success of transformation programs, especially at very large, complex global companies. So you're starting to see finance people use tools, process modeling, stakeholder mapping, proper resourcing, critical pathing, things like that you wouldn't have seen in finance projects not that long ago. And what I think is behind all this, I'll just skip very quickly, is that there's very high stakes involved when you're talking about very large, multiple region, multi-year companies. Companies can't afford to get this wrong. So, it's no surprise that, again, 45% of our survey takers use benchmarking before and after a process change. You might not have seen that 2 or 3 years ago. 81% say their companies are committed to continuous improvement. Now, this, given that the vast majority of our survey respondents were finance people, I found this surprising. We could talk all day about that, but we don't have time. This is another finding that really surprised me. Almost 60% of senior finance executives are saying, oh, I get it. we've got to train our finance people, our finance leaders in some of these process improvement methodologies. We just can't take someone who's a super controller and throw them in the middle of a global process, planning or reporting transformation with no training. This is just some, we had Lisa Knight, who is a consultant with IBM, and she's an expert in finance transformation, and we asked her, we did an interview with her as part of our research, and again, our report is available on our knowledge base, but here are some of the points she made, and they look obvious, but you'd be surprised how often they come as surprises. Take just the second button. Do we have governance models in place? What is a reliable governance model? Does it have you thought through your need for stage gating? Have you thought through training so that everybody knows when to escalate, or who does have decision rights when the inevitable challenges come up? Those are the types of things that smart transformation process owners can bring to the table. They bring a toolkit that's just loaded with those kinds of things that, again, the typical finance person who's never been on that terrain may not think to ask. This is one of my favorite slides. This comes from a case study that we did with the CFO, Dalen Hawk, who's now the CFO of Zurich North America. She had been put in charge of leading a global project aiming at improving financial planning and performance management. She needed to integrate, she needed to integrate operations and planning and move to an 18-month rolling forecast model for all operations globally. Now, the telephone poll, this comes from her presentation. She says her team referred to their planning process as the beast, okay? And she said this was a schematic. They had 9 disjointed process models. They had 3,000 spreadsheets with 30,000 live links. It was just something that had to be addressed. Again, we have an in-depth case on her, but I just pulled out a few of the points that she really, really stressed, and they tended to land on what we call, those squishy areas of change management or the communication. She talked repeatedly about the need to win the hearts and minds. And my counterpart, Jonathan Kraft, in our Business Excellence program, does a lot of work around how do you, everyone says, oh, you got to get buy-in from the top, or you got to get buy-in from the key stakeholders horizontally. How do you do that? That is a lot more difficult than it sounds. But she said the first thing you do, you have to start with aligning people into centers of excellence. Identify what competency models you have with a clean sheet of paper, and then figure out how to put the right people in the right jobs at the right time. Again, easier said than done, especially if you're doing it on a global level. Another case we talked to involved level 3 communications, very, very large American multinational telecoms company and internet service provider. And I had the pleasure of speaking with Grant Merrill there, who is Director of Project Management for Financial Assurance. And it was really interesting to find out what he and his team of Six Sigma experts, black belts, are up to. So his area of expertise ranges from cost and margin assurance and lean process design to systems design and process change. It's a really interesting story, but in a nutshell, he talked about, for instance, revenue coverage is one dimension. Okay, they've developed what he calls an internal revenue coverage model. He says we look at all the revenue that we have in the company, and we examine each month both base and incremental, and we look at the quality of our controls around those revenue streams. For example, is our contract management system working well? Do we know if and when to convert a certain contract into a lease payment model? Things of that nature. But get this, he said overall he's responsible for a program that's capable of bringing in about $20 million annually in terms of fixing revenue leakage. And he talks a lot about how to keep those leaks from opening up again. He uses scorecards. He's got green belts. He has a quota for green belts. He's got a deal cut with the CFO. And I said, why do you do that? And he said, because we want a workforce that can solve any business problem. So I found that a nuance in thinking very, very revealing. Just quickly, in the interest of time, we also talked to the folks over at Royal Dutch Shell. They have a very interesting take. They had started out wanting to address what they had benchmarked and found was an intolerable level of cost when you're measuring finance as a % of total revenue. And they were going through an ERP change. But at the same time, they realized they had to build a model for developing competencies in finance. And I know this is a chart that's hard to read, but in a nutshell, what they do is create a collaborative portal so that they archive and tend to the knowledge that is gained in finance process transformation. So it's, you go through a big process like this, and there's a lot of learning. You just don't want it to evaporate. So that was a great lesson learned from Shell. Just quickly here, that you have to pick the right approach to project management, and there are more than can be mentioned. I mentioned sound project governance. A really key issue is commit sufficient resources. Too many times you hear about, if you go and talk with people who have been launched onto a change program, well, who's doing your day job while you're devoted to leading this charge? Well, I'm still doing my day job. That's a recipe for disaster as well. So again, you have to look at your resources, reasonable time frames, check the expectations of your stakeholder group, and be sure your budget for change is appropriate. Finally, this is a funny chart. It just talks about the need to engage all stakeholders. What we see here is, if you talk to different people, they have a different concept of what the outcome is going to be. So as marketing requested it, there was one picture. Somebody else ordered it differently. That's how engineering designed it. Well, look at the last one. Guess what the customer ordered in the first place? So again, be sure what it is you're trying to fix and how to get there. Thank you. Back to you, Ernie.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, for that great content. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Phil Lee. Phil Lee is the Accounting Controller at New Teacher Center. Phil joined New Teacher Center in January of 2012. Phil is responsible for New Teacher Center's annual audit, financial reporting, general ledger, all tax filings, payroll, and budgeting. Phil has 10 years of experience as tax accounting manager at West Marine and Granite Construction. Prior to that, Phil served at Arthur Anderson and Cooper's in Brand for several years. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor back over to Mary, who is going to drive our interactive case study featuring Phil Lee. Mary, the floor is once again yours. Please take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Ernie, and welcome to Phil. We're so happy to have you here today. Let's start with, why don't you tell us what the mission of the New Teacher Center is, and really your business operating model.
Right, Mary. Thank you again for having me for your seminar. So our New Teacher Center's mission really is to improve student learning by accelerating the effectiveness of new teachers and school leaders. We seek to reduce the achievement gap in our nation's schools by accelerating the effectiveness of new teachers through a comprehensive mentoring and professional development programs. And currently, we support about 6,300 mentors to improve the effectiveness of about 26,000 teachers across the country. So we're really...
You're pretty decentralized. You've got a lot of people moving around, right?
We have a lot of people moving around. We have a lot of people living in various states. We have many offices around the country, so a lot of road warriors. Our business model is pretty straightforward. We generate fee-for-service revenue through contracts with school boards, state boards of education, and various local agencies. And then we also get support through philanthropic organizations, through grants, generally speaking, both temporarily restricted and unrestricted grants. Most of our revenue comes from contracts, They engage us to define induction infrastructure, manage on-the-ground induction programs, deliver professional development, which I'll refer to as PD throughout the, if I refer to it again. We analyze school teaching and learning conditions through a series of surveys that we perform and share the data with the districts. We work closely with state and local leaders to help ensure program relevancy and sustainability, and approximately 40% of NTC revenue comes from national funders, so that's the grant side. And then their support allows us to expand our impact, develop new products and services, do a lot of R&D, and build the organization infrastructure.
It really sounds that you're in an interesting place given everything going on with, it's in the news practically every day. The need to start earlier, better early education. How can how can U.S. schools keep from falling behind? There's been some interesting results recently, finding out that, American schools always thought we're the best. Well, we're not. We've got some catching up to do, so good luck to you. Bill, give us a little bit of background on how the new Teacher Center came out of UC Santa Cruz, and what was that change like? What did you have to go through?
Yeah, so we were founded in 1998 at UC Santa Cruz as a formal program. We actually existed before that for about 10 years, but really 98 was we became NTC. And we really had trouble servicing and helping out some of our more national clients. So in July 2009, we decided to leave NTC and become an independent nonprofit. And, as an independent nonprofit, since we had 10 plus years under our belt of program delivery and operations and research, we were very mature on the operations side of business. But the back office and the accounting, legal, HR, since it all leveraged UCSC's infrastructure at that time, we were very immature, more like a startup. So we tried various things to do it on the cheap, I guess, for lack of a better term. We had open source software that for our ERP, CRM, and accounting didn't really work out too well. It was free, but it was expensive to program and tailor to our needs, and actually it was actually kind of impossible to tailor to our needs. It really wasn't very functional. So with the weak infrastructure, fast-paced environment, we've been growing very rapidly over the past couple of years. We ended up having some issues with our annual audits, and internal financial reporting was kind of non-existent. So it was really hard to get metrics and data on what we were doing. So that was what I stepped into when I came aboard back in January. It was pretty interesting. It was pretty fun.
Mm-hmm. Let's peel the onion on that a little bit, because I think an awful lot of the people in the performative audience represent what some people call fast companies, or companies that really have a need to scale quickly. And, I can see that as a startup, it's very easy for whoever's funding the operation to be very penny pincher oriented. But as you said, when you got there, things were kind of, let's say, needed a lot of work, kind of messy, unable to do good financial reporting. You had issues with the internal controls. Was there a CFO there at the time?
So the CFO had changed actually about 3 months before I came, so she hired me. So before that, they had a CFO, and there was a lot of issues with what they were trying to do at the time, and I'm not familiar. All I'm familiar with was what I walked into. So they did have a CFO, but I think the new CFO that they brought in, who's my boss now, she was really great, and really forward-thinking in a lot of these terms that we're talking about today.
Give me an example of that, Phil, if you will. So she had a vision of where we are now and where we needed to go, as opposed to just putting out fires that came up daily.
Right. So, really, when I came on board, she said to me that, here's a list of 100 priorities, but at the very top, you have to, we need you to pick a new ERP, CRM, and accounting package to be at our core of our business. And we need to be able to my goal is, or her goal at the time was to be able to take on with our existing staff any contract, any grant, no matter how complex, no matter what the requirements are, and we can handle it without having to, without bursting at the seams. So that was really what it was all about.
Did you think about the process models, so to speak, or end-to-end process, the steps in basic, whether it's financial reporting
right.
or payables processing?
Right. That's really important, because a really good example is, so we, like I said, we have fee-for-service contracts, and we have very highly skilled employees who go out and train mentors, and it's really kind of esoteric in a way, but and every one of our contracts is different, although we're working on standardizing those. But it's really, in order for us to go out and bill our customers, we need to understand what work has been done. And the only way that we could do it at the time was to via email, via voicemail, via telephone calls, via Google calendars, all these different data inputs that we'd have to try and figure out what people were doing, when they were doing it. Then we could send a bill and collect revenue. And things got very bogged down. It was very slow.
So what was your average time to bill when you got there?
Oh, it was old and cold. I mean, it was well beyond, there were invoices that were outstanding, more than 90 days, more than, 120 days. It was,
oh dear.
And it was, and it was, we were way behind on even getting the bills out the door in many respects. So,
all right, let's toggle over to the fix. So, what were your basic needs, and how did you figure out what kind of software you were going to need to address this situation?
Well, yeah, we needed something that was reliable, was easy to use, was easily auditable, also flexible, and would allow us to help us to redesign our processes, which were broken at the time, within a functioning system. So we could do a soup to nuts. Here is here's the work we've done. Here's the time that's involved. Here's the products that we sold. Here's a bill. So we're still working on that, but we have the tools in place with NetSuite and some of the other partners that we're looking at to kind of complete that cycle. But we're about 80% of the way there.
So how does, give us a little more granular detail on how the NetSuite system supports finance at your organization now? Basic management accounting, project funding, budgeting.
Right.
What else?
Yeah, exactly. So we use NetSuite for all of our core financial needs. Since we're a nonprofit, we do fund accounting, so we use their basic projects module to track our grants and contracts, and we're actually upgrading to advanced projects because there's a lot more functionality there with kind of creating automated scopes of work and things like that. That'll help us in the billing process. We use NetSuite for our day-to-day transactions for accounts payable, accounts receivable, bank recs, sales tax transactions, inventory, cash reconciliations, you name it, everything. Me being an accountant, of course, my main goal is that every month we reconcile every single balance sheet account. And I understand what's in there, and so that's a key need and control that I have in place, and this NetSuite really helps us to do that quite efficiently.
Especially given what you're talking about before with your sales contracts being so customizable.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So,
that's correct.
Now, and let me be clear: is this a cloud-based environment?
We're cloud-based. I mean, most of our systems are, except for some of our documents that we store on servers and things like that, is cloud-based. So, yep. So NetSuite, of course, is cloud-based.
So maybe you could mention, perhaps travel or HRIS or some of the other functionalities that you've kind of plugged into or integrated with the basic NetSuite platform.
Right. So yeah. So NetSuite was really our starting point, and then, we knew that they were the major player in kind of a mid-market company like ours. So, what systems, part of the evaluation process, of course, picking them is who's connected with them, who's got integrations, who's a partner, all those kinds of things. So we use a travel service and that's a cloud-based travel service and expense reporting. So everybody does all their expense reports online and their travel reports, and they buy their tickets, everything, and that's all through this cloud-based service.
And is that a mobile application as well? So people can submit their expenses using smartphones and things like that?
Yeah, exactly right. And that functionality works really well, actually. And so that comes through. That's through a connector, so it's a push from this cloud-based service into NetSuite. So it's a little bit different than being integrated per se, but that works pretty good. We also are going to a cloud-based HRIS and payroll system, and those are fully integrated with NetSuite. So I'm pretty excited about getting our payroll data in NetSuite without having to do big giant journal entries and a lot of analysis behind it. We can do the analysis after it actually gets in there and make sure everything's okay. We use a sales tax management system. They do all our compliance for us. That's fully integrated. Basically, when we sell taxable product, it immediately is recognized by that system, and either it's taxed or it's tax exempt, and they do all the reporting. They go and they pull the funds out of the bank and pay for us, and on our behalf.
So it's all hands-free. So that organization, you rely on them to keep up to speed with the crazy quilt of state tax regulations that are constantly in flux. So they keep an eye on that, and then automatically figure out what you owe state. Quarterly or annually are those payments made?
It depends on the state requirements. Some are monthly, some are quarterly, some are annually. It just depends. They handle that. I don't really have to worry about it, so it's great.
And why is that more cost efficient for you, Phil, than hiring a full-time, or even a full FTE or part-time FTE to chase that down?
Yeah, I think that this job for us is probably about a third to a half, maybe FTE, and that, the cost of that plus benefits plus insurance, everything that is involved with having a person, we pay a SaaS fee it really is a fraction of that cost. So it's great. It's cool. I mean, and also we don't have to have research services. We don't have to have, all the other independent systems that would have to go in place if we did it all.
So what drove you to say very early on, we have to go with the cloud? I know you're out there in Silicon Valley. I know it's just, automatic that people talk about the latest and the greatest. But, there's a lot of finance and accounting people out there that are interested in what cloud can do, but still, you scratch the surface and you see a lot of resistance. What drove you and your CFO to say, this is the way for us? Right.
Well, we're very forward-thinking in our technology here at NTC, and even better than being in Silicon Valley, we're in Santa Cruz, which is even not bad if you ask me.
Over the hill.
Yeah, over the hill, exactly. So we like to push our systems to the limits, and a lot of times even past the limits, and try to break them many times. So the thing that's great about cloud-based systems, based on scripting, based on HTML or whatever. I'm not a super tech guy, but it gives us a little more flexibility as far as being able to customize some of our needs. And it really meets with our technology profile and some of our other systems that we use, which are cloud-based. For some of our program delivery. So we have integration as far as contacts go and things like that. So it's super important. Also, the mobility aspect of it, for people to be able to get in their travel, to people to be able to do their timekeeping and their time cards. Hope soon be able to develop a scope of work on the fly, all integrated with NetSuite, all done on a mobile app or or an iPad or something like that. Super important for us to just streamline our operations. where upgrades and enhancements are, provided by the service provider, so we don't really have to manage those. I mean, really, my job is to understand what the upgrade and enhancement, how it's going to impact us, what the new functionality is, what old functionality changes. Other than that, I don't have to worry about getting a disk in and dropping it in a server and making sure that everything works and keeping up to date on that. That's, that's somebody else's job, and it's great.
So the final question here, Phil. How would you answer this question? What are really, you talked a lot about efficiency and effectiveness, but what are the strategic benefits of coming out of the gate as a fast company and having the technology you think you need to succeed? How does that support your organization's longer, midterm, or longer term strategic intent?
Right. So our focus on technology and cutting-edge technology is really, it instills in us a culture and a drive to find technology solutions that are innovative, integrative, and cloud-based. It's really pushing towards that. So, super lucky that we have the resources to help build this infrastructure now, and we're also under a growth capital campaign for scaling purposes, because we're going to be 2 to 3 times as big as we are in 3 to 4 years, with probably double the amount of employees. We need to scale quickly, and we need systems that can handle that. So cloud-based systems really have the functionality and the flexibility that we need to help us do that without a lot of pain, on our side.
Well, sounds great. I think I'd love to chat with you in 2 years and get a story of how that scaling has gone. And so take some notes, because we'll come back and catch up with you and see how it went.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's a super exciting time for us. We're really excited and a little bit nervous,
Sounds great. With that, I'm going to check back with Ernie and see what we have coming up next.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you very much, Phil, as well, for that compelling conversation. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and kick off our Q&A session. So again, before I do that, we encourage all audience members to please ask your question on today's topic via the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. We have 2 great speakers with a lot of expertise, so we'd like you to take full advantage of the opportunity to ask them your questions. And then during the close of the Q&A session, I'm going to go ahead and launch our final polling question. First question I would like to direct to Mary. Regarding the results of the survey you were discussing, did you find any meaningful variances in the key results based on company size or geography in the results at all?
Ernie, I didn't do crosstabs, meaning I didn't do a lot of cross-tabbing, because we had kind of designed the survey to go to all industries. We didn't want to have an industry bias at first, and then companies of different sets. I think the question in the survey that pointed to the difference between whether it's a one-off change program for finance, or whether the program we were talking about was part of a multi-year, multi-geo change, such as we saw at Zurich. So the meaningful variances are, I think, those that are forced by necessity to go to a global operating model, to adopt a common process model, to force consistent financial process and language and data and common way of thinking and doing is absolutely a requirement to do business today, especially in emerging markets. And you see industries such as big pharma trying to compete in emerging markets, and they just absolutely have to have improved time to value, improved time to revenue, and improved product development, and product life cycles are shorter and shorter. So I think that's pushing the very largest companies to get very serious about finance transformation. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my observation.
Okay, great. Next question is for Phil. Someone is asking about, could you please speak to the biggest challenge that you face when choosing the accounting software?
So the biggest challenge that we faced, I would say that there are a lot of good vendors out there, and it was, and I, quite frankly, when I came to New Teacher Center, I hadn't even realized what the cloud was and what that all meant and everything. So I had to get quickly educated on that, and realized quite quickly how important it was for us here. So it was difficult. And it came down to a couple of vendors that looked like they would work quite well. But I think in the end, the answer was pretty simple, that NetSuite was the right answer for us, because they had the history and the infrastructure and the vision that would kind of match up best with what we needed. Does that help?
Oh, sure, great. So kind of a follow-up question. You may have spoken to this, but was there any internal resistance to having applications in the cloud across other areas of the company? You mentioned how those are all kind of in a honeycomb. Now, was there any internal resistance there where you had to go out and kind of educate people on the value of the cloud once you realized that value yourself?
No, not really, not here. We're all about the cloud, and it was, I think that if we would have gone with a network application that needed to be stored on the server, I probably would have gotten resistance to that, to tell you the truth.
Okay, great. So I'll get you with another question here. Was there any convincing that had to go on for everyone to use your T&E system online? Your employees, were they all comfortable with that? Was it training? Was there any issues on getting everyone to buy into that?
Yeah, of course. People are very, very busy, and our road warriors work pretty long days, and then they have to come in and they have to do their travel, and they have to do their timesheets. So the travel can, and for some people, the travel can be quite a lot of work, right? Because you have receipts and everything, and we've got a fairly strict reimbursement and reporting policy here. So it's just, we really have had to. We had to come out roll out a new policy. We had to put in deadlines. We have to hold people to it. And, unfortunately, from time to time, we have to push the matter up and be consistent with how we treat everybody. And, if someone's not complying with what we need, then, we have to escalate it and get some of the more senior executives involved. And we try to avoid that at every cost, but it happens from time to time. So that one's constant. We always have to work on that and keep our eyes on that. I don't think that will ever be totally seamless, but with the way the application works, it works great. It's easy to use, and that really helps. People like using their iPads. They think it's really kind of sexy, so to get them to use it, to do something like that is not too hard.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil. Next question will be for Mary. Can you offer us some insights regarding your research or your many conversations with finance leaders about how the successful finance transformations have effectively identified and engaged all the relevant stakeholders?
Gee, I think the case that comes to mind from this round of research, again, was Zurich. I recall the person we talked to had figured out, she had to go, talk about road warrior, she had to go all over the world and meet with regional CFOs and identify where there were likely to be pockets of resistance, and she did that. And she tells a story about how she did, I think she ran into a CFO in Latin America, and the person was saying, hey, look, I'm just building a new business here. We're scaling like crazy. I've got to just be able to customize, and I've got to be able to do what I need to do today to hit my targets. She knew that person was going to hold out. So she had done a good job of identifying the key stakeholders and the ones that were likely to drag their feet and kind of drag everybody else down. So at that point, she went to the CFO of the parent company in Zurich, Switzerland, and had that person intervene. Clearly, she had been tapped by the parent company CFO to run the organization, and she had received his assurances at the very get-go that she would have the backup when indeed she ran into such resistance. So that's just one example of thinking forward, you know, understanding that you're dealing with people who are trying their best, who are under a lot of pressure. It's not a matter of, you know, just taking out a piece of paper and redesigning a process, you know, with boxes and chevrons and flowcharts. The trickiest part is the communications and the people change, and she was able to anticipate those things and be ready for them when she hit them.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mary. Yeah, it seems as if the person was proactive, and I also feel that that face-to-face interaction, so you can show that you understand their problems and are not trying to create problems. You're trying to create efficiencies, but also selling them how the project is going to make their job easier and help them offer more strategic value. Next question would be for Phil. Can you describe the role of IT in the cloud application selection and training process? And then an ancillary question, how has the role of IT changed since you've moved more and more applications into the cloud?
Sure. Well, we've, you know, IT and I have worked very closely together. We were kind of joined at the hip through the whole process, through the selection of the applications and, you know, the review of the different vendors. So, you know, my goal is to always, we're very collaborative here, of course, so my goal is to always have them in the know and have our IT department sign off on any project that we undertake, and if they have any concerns, of course, you know, we'll address that and see if we can come to a solution. I think the role of IT, how it's changed, you know, so I haven't been here that long, but I know that, you know, from my other jobs that I've been at, you know, there's really been a big shift from kind of hardwired networking, you know, having to use VPN and having to, you know, use G drives and all this stuff, you know, and kind of syncing up disparate systems to try and get coherent meaning out of some of the data, you know, to really, it's more of you know, focusing on workflows and integrations, scripting, you know, and, you know, making kind of, in a way, helping us to change our business processes in a way that's going to work with the application and see how we can change the application to work with some of our needs. You know, it's kind of a back and forth on that. I think I've worked more closely with IT in the 2 years I've been here than I have in most of my other jobs, and we work together on a day-to-day basis. It's really pretty cool.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Next question I will direct to Mary. Do you see any specific areas where there seems to be, in general, low-hanging fruit for companies to drive finance process improvements?
That's a very interesting question, because the answer is not automatically, you know, that we're going to throw some technology at the problem. You know, I think, you know, take for example what goes on in accounts payables processing. Okay, I've got benchmarks that show that, you know, certainly 60% of your labor cost in payables processing is related to, well, I'm sorry, 60% of the total process cost is labor related, so it's your people cost. So if you've got, and then I've got metrics that show, you know, the percent of companies that do a very good job at hands-free, first-time match between a PO and an invoice. And if those, typically a large company can handle that with systems, but so that there's straight-through processing. But there's still, despite the systems environment, even at these great best practice systems and environments, you'll still be shocked to find that there's some percentage, 40, 50% of invoices that have to be, require manual intervention. Okay? And again, keep in mind companies that have tremendous volumes of invoices to process and to approve for payment every month. Okay? So you say to yourself, what's going on there? They've got the systems in place. The AP process looks pretty well designed. You know, 9 out of 10 times you're going to find that the root cause lives upstream, okay? So the root cause is something goes on in the procurement space or sales, or things change, okay? There's change orders all along, and there's not, an easy way or an automatic way to efficiently ensure that those changes get reflected in the paperwork that drive the invoice payment in the end, right? So a lot of people will throw a lot of effort at fixing accounts payable, but then they fail to take the next step and organize a cross-functional kind of root cause analysis. And getting the CFO and perhaps the COO to insist that the procurement folks and the finance folks join forces and find out what's the cause of that dodgy data, what behaviors are repeatedly driving those data problems, and address them. And as our friend from Level 3 Communications said, how to find the root cause problems and fix them and be sure they stay fixed. Okay? And that may or may not require technology intervention, but it certainly requires effective group and collaborative problem solving.
Mary, can you share with us what's next in regards to your research in the arena of fixing finance or another area under your purview?
Well, Ernie, I thought you'd never ask. I have about 8 projects going on in the course of a rolling 12-month cycle. Just now wrapping up a major project on enterprise risk management that we're very excited about, and I'm ready to roll right into my next project. But I'm more looking at what does it really take to put in a truly effective, driver-based, rolling forecast-based planning and performance management system, or process. We will also be looking at how companies are reaching for innovative solutions to make that work. So, it's one of those evergreen topics. You can always write about planning and performance management, but I think there have been some innovations, cloud-based as well, on the technology side that have a lot to offer these days. So we're looking at that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. In order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and close the Q&A session. We'll coordinate with our speakers in getting answers to any unanswered questions and possibly get those posted on performative.com. A big thank you to Mary and Phil for their time and insights. They're clearly thought leaders and an excellent source of information on today's topic. Note in the post-webinar survey, which you'll be prompted to take right after the webinar concludes, you'll have the opportunity to express your interest in being connected with today's speakers with just a few mouse clicks. Thanks again to today's sponsor, NetSuite, and their commitment to thought leadership, which helps us make this webinar possible. And finally, a big thank you to the audience for your valuable time. We hope to see you soon again at another Performative event or online at www.performative.com. Make the rest of your day great, everyone. Thank you.